It all began on a stormy night, the kind that makes you feel like the world is ending outside your window. The rain hammered against the glass, and lightning illuminated the dark sky intermittently. I, Clara, was sitting alone in my living room, sipping a glass of red wine. My husband, Thomas, was on a business trip, leaving me to weather the storm on my own. My phone buzzed, breaking the silence. It was a message from my boss, Victor. He was charismatic and confident, qualities that had always drawn people to him. "Hey, Clara, are you up for a quick chat?" he asked. My heart raced a little, not just because of the storm, but because Victor had a way of making mundane interactions feel significant. I replied, "Sure, what's up?" he called almost immediately. His voice was smooth, comforting even. "I have a proposition for you," he began. "I know it's late, but how about a friendly game of poker online, just to pass the time?" It sounded innocent enough, so I agreed. We played for a while, chatting about work and life. As the night wore on and the storm outside intensified, our conversation took a more personal turn. We talked about our dreams, our fears, and our frustrations. I felt a connection with Victor that I hadn't felt with anyone in a long time. "How about we make this interesting?" he suggested. "A little bet to spice things up." My curiosity was piqued. "What kind of bet?" I asked. He chuckled softly. "If you win, I'll take over your least favourite project for a month. If I win, you have to have dinner with me." I hesitated, knowing that this was treading into dangerous territory, but the wine had loosened my inhibitions, and the thought of a little adventure was alluring. "Deal," I said, feeling a thrill of excitement. We continued to play, and despite my best efforts, I lost. Victor's laugh was warm, almost comforting. "Looks like you're having dinner with me, Clara," he said. The following week, Thomas was still away, and Victor reminded me of our bet. "Friday night, there's a new place downtown I've been wanting to try. I'll pick you up at 7, he said. The day of our dinner, I was a bundle of nerves. I spent hours getting ready, choosing a dress that was elegant yet understated. When Victor arrived, his eyes lit up. "You look stunning," he said, making my heart flutter. The restaurant was cozy and intimate, the perfect setting for a night that felt both exciting and dangerous. We talked and laughed, the conversation flowing effortlessly. It felt good to be seen, to be heard, to be appreciated in a way that I hadn't felt in a long time. As the night went on, the atmosphere grew more charged. Victor's compliments became more personal, his gaze more intense. I knew we were crossing a line, but I couldn't help the way he made me feel. The attraction was undeniable, and I was caught in its grip. After dinner, he suggested we take a walk along the waterfront. The rain had stopped, leaving the air crisp and fresh. We walked in silence for a while, the city lights reflecting on the water. Victor stopped and turned to me, his expression serious. "Clara, I've been thinking about you a lot lately. I know this is complicated, but I can't ignore my feelings." His words sent a shiver down my spine. I felt a surge of emotions, a mix of fear, excitement, and guilt. Before I could respond, he leaned in and kissed me. It was gentle at first, but quickly became more passionate. I found myself kissing him back, lost in the moment. When we finally pulled apart, I was breathless. "Victor, this is wrong. I can't do this," I whispered, but my voice lacked conviction. He looked into my eyes, his gaze intense. "I know, but I can't stop thinking about you. Can you honestly say you don't feel the same?" I couldn't. The truth was, I had been drawn to Victor for a long time, and now that we had crossed this line, there was no going back. The days that followed were a whirlwind of secret meetings and stolen moments. Each encounter was more intense than the last, and I was falling deeper into something I knew I shouldn't. The guilt was eating away at me, but the desire was too strong to resist. One evening, as I was leaving Victor's apartment, Thomas called. His voice was cheerful, oblivious to the turmoil inside me. "Hey darling, I'll be home tomorrow. I can't wait to see you," he said. My heart sank. The reality of what I was doing hit me like a tidal wave. I was betraying the man who loved me, and for what? A fleeting moment of passion? I knew I had to end things with Victor, but the thought of losing him was unbearable. That night I lay in bed, unable to sleep. The guilt and confusion were suffocating. When Thomas came home the next day, I tried to act normal, but he sensed something was off. "Clara, is everything okay?" he asked, concern etched on his face. I forced a smile. "Just tired, that's all." But he wasn't convinced. Over the next few weeks, our marriage became strained. Thomas tried to reach out, but I was too consumed by my own guilt and the secret I was keeping. My relationship with Victor continued, each encounter leaving me more conflicted and lost. One night, after a particularly intense argument with Thomas, I found myself at Victor's doorstep. I needed an escape, a moment of solace from the turmoil at home. Victor welcomed me with open arms, his presence a temporary balm to my aching heart. But as I lay in his arms, I realized I was only digging myself deeper into a hole I couldn't escape. The next morning, I woke up to find Victor staring at me. "Clara, we can't keep doing this. It's tearing you apart," he said, his voice filled with concern. Tears welled up in my eyes. "I don't know what to do, Victor. I'm so lost." He held me close, his touch comforting yet bittersweet. "You need to make a choice, Clara, for your sake and Thomas's." The weight of his words hung heavy in the air. I knew he was right, but the thought of losing either of them was unbearable. I left Victor's apartment, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. When I got home, Thomas was waiting for me, his expression a mix of anger and hurt. "Where have you been?" he demanded. The confrontation I had been dreading was finally here. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding. "Thomas, we need to talk." His eyes darkened. "About what, Clara? About how distant you've been? About the lies?" The guilt was overwhelming, and I felt my resolve crumbling. "Thomas, I've been seeing someone else." The words were like a dagger, slicing through the fragile peace that remained between us. He stared at me, disbelief and pain etched on his face. "Who?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Victor, my boss," I replied, my voice trembling. The silence that followed was deafening. Thomas's face contorted with rage and sorrow. "How could you, Clara, after everything we've been through?" Tears streamed down my face. "I'm so sorry, Thomas. I never meant for this to happen." He shook his head, his eyes filled with betrayal. "I can't do this anymore, Clara. I need time to think." He left the house, leaving me alone with my guilt and regret. The days that followed were a blur of pain and self-recrimination. I tried to reach out to Thomas, but he needed space. Victor tried to comfort me, but his presence only reminded me of the mess I had created. I was caught in a whirlwind of emotions, unable to find a way out. My work suffered, and I found it hard to focus on anything. The weight of my actions pressed down on me, making it hard to breathe. I started to isolate myself, pushing away friends and family, unable to face their judgment. One evening, as I sat alone in my living room, the storm outside mirrored the turmoil within me. The sound of the rain was soothing, but it did little to quiet my restless mind. I picked up my phone and dialed Thomas's number, my heart pounding. He answered on the third ring, his voice distant. "Clara, what do you want?" "Thomas, I know I've hurt you, and I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need you to know that I'm truly sorry. I love you and I want to make things right," I pleaded. There was a long pause before he spoke. "Clara, I need time. This isn't something I can just get over." His words were like a knife to my heart, but I understood. "I understand, Thomas. Take all the time you need." The call ended, leaving me with a glimmer of hope, but also a deep sense of loss. The journey to redemption would be long and painful, but I was willing to do whatever it took. In the following weeks, I focused on healing myself. I continued therapy, delving deep into my emotions and the reasons behind my actions. It was a painful process, but slowly, I started to gain some clarity. I realized that my actions had been driven by a deep-seated insecurity and a need for validation. The thrill of the forbidden had been a temporary escape from the monotony of my life, but it had come at a tremendous cost. I reached out to Thomas periodically, updating him on my progress and letting him know I was committed to change. He remained distant, but there were moments of warmth that gave me hope. Victor and I had ended our affair, but we remained friends. He respected my need to focus on my marriage and my personal growth. It was a bittersweet ending, but I knew it was for the best. One day, as I was leaving a therapy session, I saw Thomas waiting for me outside. My heart skipped a beat. "Thomas, what are you doing here?" He looked at me, his expression unreadable. "I wanted to talk," he said. We walked to a nearby park and sat on a bench, the silence between us heavy with unspoken words. Finally, Thomas spoke. "Clara, I've been doing a lot of thinking. I can't forget what happened, but I believe people can change. I want to try to work through this, but it's going to take time and effort from both of us." Tears filled my eyes. "I'm willing to do whatever it takes, Thomas. I love you and I want to make this right." He took my hand, squeezing it gently. "We'll take it one day at a time, Clara. But no more secrets, no more lies." We started the long, arduous journey of rebuilding our relationship. It wasn't easy, and there were days when the pain and distrust threatened to overwhelm us. But slowly, we began to heal. Therapy sessions, honest conversations, and a renewed commitment to each other helped us navigate the rocky path. The process was painful, but it brought us closer in ways we hadn't anticipated. We learned to communicate better, to understand each other's needs and fears. The betrayal had left scars, but it also opened the door for deeper understanding and connection. As months turned into a year, the wounds began to heal, leaving behind a stronger, more resilient bond. The storm that had once threatened to destroy us had instead forged a new, unbreakable connection. I realized that while we could never forget the past, we could learn from it and build a future that was even stronger. My relationship with Victor became a distant memory, a chapter that had taught me valuable lessons about myself and my marriage. Thomas and I continued to grow together, facing challenges head-on and emerging stronger each time. The journey was far from over, but with each step, I felt more confident that we were on the right path. As I stood by the window one evening, watching the rain fall, I felt a sense of peace. The storm had passed, leaving behind a calm that was both comforting and hopeful. I turned to find Thomas standing behind me, his eyes filled with love and determination. "We've come a long way, Clara," he said, wrapping his arms around me, "and we'll keep moving forward, together." I smiled, feeling the warmth of his embrace. "Together," I echoed, knowing that whatever lay ahead, we would face it side by side. The journey was far from over, but we were ready for whatever came next. The past would always be a part of us, but it no longer defined us. We had emerged from the storm stronger, more connected, and ready to face the future with hope and love. The tragedy that had once threatened to tear us apart had instead become the foundation for a new, stronger bond. And as we stood there watching the rain, I knew that we were ready for whatever life had in store.